The cold metal deck vibrated beneath Captain Lee, Minho's boots as he walked across the bridge of the mining station Forgotten Dawn. 50 years had passed since anyone had spoken of Earth as anything but a memory. The Galactic Council's official records were clear. Humans were extinct, wiped out when their home planet burned in some terrible disaster that left the entire Sol system poisoned and empty. Minho stopped in front of the main display screen, watching the endless flow of space. Traffic reports scrolled past. Ships from dozens of alien species moved freely through what had once been human territory. The Zelkari had claimed the outer colonies. The hegemony had taken the mining worlds. Even the peaceful Altarians had been given human research stations. As compensation for their losses in some forgotten war, not one report mentioned humans. It was as if his entire species had been erased from history. "Captain," called Park Gina from her position at the communications station. The young woman's fingers moved quickly over her control panel, her face lit by the soft glow of her screens. "I'm picking up another one of those strange signals." Minho turned toward her, his weathered face showing interest for the first time in weeks. "Same pattern as before?" "Yes, sir. It's very faint, but it's definitely using the old encryption codes." Gina's voice dropped to almost a whisper. "The ones from before the Exodus." The bridge became quiet except for the steady hum of the life support systems. Chief Engineer Kim Tae-young, an older man whose gray hair had turned white in the years since Earth's destruction, slowly looked up from his workstation. His hands stopped moving over the repair diagnostics he had been running. "That's not possible," Tae-young said, his voice rough with disbelief. "We all saw what happened. The Council showed us the recordings." Earth was completely destroyed. Minho stared at the weak signal dancing across Gina's display. The transmission was old, maybe 20 years by galactic standards, but it carried something that made his heart race. Coordinates. Numbers that pointed to a location far beyond the borders of Council space, out in the wild regions where only smugglers and desperate refugees dared to travel. "Gina, can you clean up that signal? I want to hear what it's saying." The young officer worked for several minutes, her equipment humming as it tried to separate the message from the background noise of space. Finally, a voice crackled through the speakers. It was human, definitely human, but the words were broken and hard to understand. Double quotes. "Anyone out there? Coordinates follow. ... Sanctuary. ... Not all lost." The message repeated twice more before fading into static. Minho felt something he had not experienced in decades. Hope. Real, burning hope that maybe, just maybe, they were not the last humans in the galaxy. "Sir," Gina said quietly, "I've run the encryption through our databases. This signal is using codes that were only known to the evacuation ships, the ones that left Earth in the final days." Tae-young stood up from his station, his old joints creaking. "Captain, even if this is real, even if there are other humans out there, we can't just abandon our duties here. This mining station provides resources for 12 different worlds." "Does it?" Minho asked. "Or does it provide cheap labor for alien corporations that took over human facilities?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Everyone on the bridge knew the truth. They were not partners in this operation. They were employees, barely tolerated survivors of a dead species. Allowed to work because they were skilled and asked for very little in return. Minho walked to the navigation station and called up a star chart. The coordinates from the signal pointed to a region of space that appeared empty on all official maps. No trade routes, no colonies, no resources worth fighting over. It was the perfect place to hide. "Gina, how many crew members do we have who would be willing to take a risk?" The young woman thought for a moment. "Maybe 24 humans, sir, and perhaps half a dozen Altarians who served on human ships before the Exodus. They never quite fit in with their own people after that." 30 people, Minho said, mostly to himself, enough to crew a small ship on a scouting mission. Tae-young walked over to stand beside his captain. "The Dawn is old, but she's tough. Built in the shipyards of New Shanghai before the disaster. She could make the journey to those coordinates, though it would take several weeks." "What about supplies? We have enough food and fuel for a 2-month journey if we're careful." Minho looked around the bridge at his small crew. These people had become his family over the years of exile. They had all lost everything when Earth burned, but they had found each other in the darkness. Now they might have a chance to find something more. "We leave in 1 week," he announced. "Anyone who wants to come is welcome. Anyone who wants to stay can remain here with the mining operation." "And if we find nothing," Gina asked, "then we come back and continue our lives here?" "But if we find what I think we might find—" Minho turned back to the star chart, his eyes fixed on the empty space where the coordinates led. "Then we might discover that reports of humanity's death have been greatly exaggerated." The journey to the coordinates took 3 weeks through empty space. Captain Lee Minho spent most of that time staring at the star charts, wondering if they were chasing ghosts or heading toward something that would change everything. The Forgotten Dawn moved quietly through the darkness, her old engines running smoothly despite their age. When they finally arrived at the destination, Minho could hardly believe what he saw on the scanner displays. 3 planets circled a bright young star, and all of them showed clear signs that someone had been working to make them suitable for life. Massive atmospheric processors pumped clouds into thin air. Orbital mirrors focused sunlight onto frozen surfaces. This was terraforming. On a scale that should have taken centuries. "Captain Park!" Gina called from her station, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm reading huge energy signatures from the second planet. There are industrial complexes down there. Big ones." Minho felt his heart racing as he guided the ship closer to the planet. The surface showed green areas that had definitely been created artificially. Cities with geometric patterns that looked human in design. In orbit around the planet, a massive space station that dwarfed anything the Galactic Council had ever built. "Sir," Gina continued, her excitement growing, "I'm transmitting our old human identification codes, and something is responding. The station is sending back recognition signals." The main view screen suddenly lit up, showing the face of a woman who looked like she had been through battles that would have broken most people. Her uniform was clearly human in style, but it carried symbols and rank insignia that Minho had never seen before. Her eyes were hard but intelligent, and when she spoke, her voice carried absolute authority. "Unknown vessel, Forgotten Dawn. This is Commander Han Yuri of Sanctuary Station. You're broadcasting old Earth fleet identification codes that haven't been used in 50 years. You're either the bravest fools in the galaxy, or the answer to prayers we've been making for decades. Which one is it?" Minho found himself struggling to speak. After so many years of believing they were alone, hearing another human voice giving orders and commanding a station was almost too much to process. "Commander Yuri, this is Captain Lee Minho. We received signal fragments with coordinates pointing to this system. We thought we were the last humans alive." The woman's stern expression changed slightly, and for just a moment, Minho could see the same pain and hope that he carried in his own heart. "Captain, you're not the last. You're not even close to being the last. Permission to come aboard granted. Dock at Bay 7. And Captain... welcome home." The docking bay of Sanctuary Station was unlike anything Minho had ever seen. Hundreds of people moved through corridors that stretched farther than he could see. But these weren't the broken survivors he had expected to find. These people moved with purpose and confidence. They wore uniforms he didn't recognize and used technology that seemed far more advanced than anything from the old Earth. Most amazing of all, there were children. Lots of children. Young people who had clearly been born after Earth's destruction, running and playing in gardens that somehow existed inside a space station. They laughed and called to each other in perfect human languages, but they had never seen the blue skies of humanity's homeworld. Commander Yuri led Minho and his officers through the station, explaining what they saw as they walked. "When Earth's final days came, we didn't just run away randomly," she said. "The government had a secret plan called the Dandelion Protocol. 47 colony ships were sent to 47 different star systems, each one carrying part of humanity's knowledge and culture. We were scattered like seeds in the wind, hoping that at least some of us would find places to grow." They stopped in front of a huge display screen that showed a map of the galaxy. Tiny lights blinked in the darkness beyond. The borders of council space, each one representing a human colony that had survived and grown in secret. "Each colony developed in different ways," Yuri continued. "Some became experts at building things. Others focused on genetic improvements to help humans survive in harsh environments. A few colonies. Her smile became cold and dangerous, eh? Few became very good at developing weapons and fighting techniques. Fighting techniques? Minho asked. Fighting who? The alien species that divided up our territory after they declared us extinct? The ones who have been capturing and enslaving any humans they could find over the past 50 years. They think. Humanity died quietly and left them free to take whatever they wanted. Yuri's eyes became hard again. They're about to learn that they made a very serious mistake. Over the next several days, Minho learned the full truth about humanity's survival. The scattered colonies had spent 50 years developing incredible new technologies. Some had built ships that could move through space in ways that seemed impossible. Others had created weapons that could adapt to any defense system. Several colonies had perfected terraforming methods that could turn dead rocks into garden worlds in just a few decades. But the most important thing they had developed was unity. Despite being separated by vast distances and having grown in different directions, all 47 colonies shared the same burning desire for justice. They wanted to reclaim what had been stolen from them. And they wanted to make sure that the species who had betrayed humanity would pay the price for their betrayal. As Minho stood looking out at the stars from Sanctuary Station's observation deck, he realized that humanity hadn't just survived. They had become something stronger, something more dangerous than they had ever been before. The galaxy was about to learn that writing off humanity as extinct had been the biggest mistake in galactic history. Admiral Choi Hoon-woo stood in the center of the command room, his gray hair catching the light from dozens of holographic displays. He was 70 years old now, but his back was still straight, and his eyes still burned with the same fire that had kept him alive when Earth died 51 years ago. He had been just 19 then, a young officer on a transport ship that had barely escaped the destruction of humanity's homeworld. Now he commanded the largest secret military force in the galaxy. The holographic conference table around him showed the faces of 47 different people, each one representing a human colony that had survived in hiding. Some faces were young, born after Earth's destruction. Others were old, like him, veterans who remembered the blue skies and green forests of humanity's lost home. But all of them shared the same hard expression of people who had learned to survive when the entire galaxy had written them off as dead. "The scouting missions are finished," Admiral Choi announced, his voice carrying easily across the room despite speaking quietly. "We now know exactly what happened to our people who didn't make it to the colony ships." He activated a display that showed a map of what had once been human territory. Red markers appeared on 17 different star systems, each one representing something that made his blood run cold. 17 forced labor camps. Approximately 2 million humans are still alive and working as slaves in alien-controlled facilities. The reaction from the colony leaders was immediate and angry. Voices rose in fury as the representatives demanded action. These were not the same diplomatic humans that the galaxy remembered from the old days. 50 years of fighting to survive in hostile environments had changed them into something harder and more dangerous. Colonel Song My-rae from the Titan's Rest colony was the first to speak clearly above the noise. Her people had spent 5 decades learning how to fight battles in the empty space between planets, and it showed in the way she moved and talked. "Admiral, the hegemony has been using Kepler 4-4 to be as a processing center for human prisoners. Our intelligence shows they're taking genetic material from our people to create enhancement drugs for their own species." Director Nam Woo-sung, whose colony had become experts at turning dead planets into garden worlds, added his own report. "The Velter Consortium has completely destroyed New Byzantium. They're strip mining the memorial sites where we buried our dead before the evacuation. They're using human grave markers as building materials." Each report was worse than the last. The alien species that had divided up human territory after declaring humanity extinct had not just taken their planets and resources. They had enslaved any humans they could find and were using them for experiments. It's forced labor, and worse. Admiral Choi listened to each report with growing anger. The galaxy had not just abandoned humanity in their darkest hour. They had actively profited from humanity's supposed extinction. carving up their territory and treating any surviving humans as property to be bought and sold. Operation Phoenix will begin in exactly 6 months, the Admiral announced when the reports were finished. We will hit all 17 systems at the same time. There will be no warnings given to the enemy. There will be no negotiations. There will be no mercy shown to those who have enslaved our people. Dr. Kong Soyoung, who led the colony that had focused on genetic improvements for humans, leaned forward in her chair. Her people had spent decades learning how to adapt human biology to survive in environments that should have been impossible to live in. Admiral, my scientists have been developing biological weapons that are specifically designed to work against each alien species that participated in taking our territory. They won't be expecting humans who can adapt to their defensive measures faster than their immune systems can respond to our attacks. Commander Yun Guan from the Phantom Fleet colony nodded in agreement. His people had become masters at building ships that could move through space without being detected by enemy sensors. My ships can phase through their energy shield systems. He added, 50 years of hiding from alien patrols taught us how to become invisible when we need to be. They won't see us coming until it's too late to stop us. The meeting continued for hours, as each colony leader explained what their people could contribute to the attack. Some had developed weapons that could adapt to any defense. Others had built ships that could move through dimensions that normal space travel couldn't access. A few colonies had focused on creating super soldiers, who were stronger and faster than baseline humans. But the most important thing they had all developed was unity. Despite being scattered across dozens of star systems and having grown in different directions, all 47 colonies shared the same burning desire for justice against the species that had betrayed them. As the conference finally ended and the holographic displays faded away, Admiral Choi remained standing alone in the command room, staring at the galactic map. His aide, Captain Lim Sumin, approached him quietly. Sir, several of the colony leaders are asking about rules of engagement for Operation Phoenix. How much force are we authorized to use? Admiral Choi was quiet for a long moment, his eyes fixed on the red markers that showed where millions of humans were being held as slaves. Captain, the galaxy decided 50 years ago that humanity was extinct. When we return to reclaim what was stolen from us, we're going to show them the difference between extinction and evolution. The old admiral's voice was calm, but Captain, Lim could hear the promise of violence that lay beneath his words. Humanity had spent 5 decades becoming something new in the darkness between stars. Now they were ready to show the galaxy exactly what they had become. The alien species that had profited from humanity's supposed death were about to learn that they should have made sure to finish the job. The attack began without warning across 17 different star systems at exactly the same moment. In the command center of the Hegemony Battle Station, orbiting Kepler 44, to be Station Commander Velcroth was reading through daily reports about slave productivity when alarms suddenly started screaming throughout the facility. Commander. His tactical officer, his voice high with panic. We have massive energy readings appearing all over the system. Unknown ships are materializing inside our defense zone. Velcroth dropped his reports and rushed to the main display screen. What he saw there should have been impossible. Dozens of sleek ships were appearing out of nowhere, their hulls seeming to bend light around them in ways that hurt to look at. Directly. They moved through space with a grace that defied everything he knew about physics and engineering, but it was the symbols painted on there, holes that made his foreheart skip beats. Blue and white markings that he recognized from old historical records, the insignia of Earth, the symbol of a species that had been declared extinct 50 years ago. That's impossible, Velcroth whispered, his mandibles clicking with nervous energy. Humans are extinct. The Council confirmed it decades ago. The lead human ship opened a communication channel, and the face that appeared on the screen belonged to an old human male with gray hair and eyes that burned with cold fire. He wore a military uniform that Velcroth had never seen before, with rank insignia that spoke of absolute authority. Attention, hegemony forces, the human said, his voice calm but carrying a promise of violence. This is Admiral Choi Hyunwoo of the Phoenix Fleet. You are currently occupying sovereign human territory and holding human citizens as slaves. You have exactly 60 seconds to surrender control of this system and release all human prisoners. Velkrith's mandibles clicked in what his species considered laughter. Human, your entire species has been extinct for 50 years. This system belongs to the hegemony by right of salvage, as declared by the Galactic Council. The human admiral's expression did not change at all. 59 seconds. All weapons, open fire on the human ships. Velkrith commanded, his voice rising to a shriek. The battle station's massive energy cannons swiveled toward the human fleet and unleashed torrents of plasma that should have vaporized any ship ever built. The weapons were powerful enough to crack the surface of a small moon, and they had never failed to destroy anything they targeted, but the plasma beams passed through the human ships as if they were not there at all. The vessels flickered like ghosts, becoming transparent at the exact moment the weapons struck them. A second later they solidified again and began returning fire with weapons that seemed to adapt and change as they fired. Impossible. Screamed. Nothing can phase through solid matter like that. The human weapons struck the battle station's shields, and something unprecedented happened. Instead of being absorbed or deflected, the energy beams seemed to learn from contact with the shields. Each subsequent shot penetrated deeper, adapting to the defensive frequencies faster than the station's systems could compensate. Within minutes, the battle station's defenses were failing, but that was only the beginning of Velkrith's nightmare. Small human ships began materializing directly inside the station's corridors, their hulls phasing through the solid metal walls as if they were made of water. Armed humans in advanced combat suits poured out of these vessels, moving with speed and coordination that seemed superhuman. The human soldiers did not waste time fighting hegemony security forces. Instead, they moved directly toward the slave processing centers with the efficiency of people who had studied the station's layout for years. They knew exactly where to go and exactly what they were looking for. Colonel Song Murray led the boarding party that reached the main processing center. The sight that greeted her was one that had fueled her anger for 5 decades. Hundreds of humans in containment cells, their bodies weakened by years of forced labor and medical experiments. Many of them looked up at her with eyes that had forgotten how to hope. "You are free," she announced, her voice carrying clearly across the facility. "Humanity has returned for you." The rescued humans stared at her in disbelief. Many of them had been prisoners for so long that they had forgotten there were still free humans anywhere in the galaxy. Some began to cry. Others fell to their knees. All of them reached toward their rescuers with trembling hands. Similar scenes were playing out across all 17 targeted systems. Human fleets that had spent 50 years learning to hide and fight in the darkness were revealing themselves as apex predators. They moved with coordination and purpose that no alien military had ever achieved. The humans did not just want their territory back. They systematically liberated every enslaved human they found, and they demanded payment for 50 years of suffering. Ships that had learned to hunt unseen in the void between stars now showed themselves as instruments of justice and revenge. By the end of the first week of fighting, the Galactic Council was holding emergency sessions, trying to understand how extinct humans had returned with technology that was far more advanced than anything in their databases. The alien species that had grown wealthy by dividing up human territory were learning a lesson that they should have understood 50 years earlier. When you write off an entire species as dead, you had better make absolutely certain that you have killed every last one of them. Because if even a few survive, they will spend every day planning their return. When they come back, they will be stronger, smarter, far more dangerous than they ever were before. The galaxy was about to discover that humanity's greatest strength had never been their diplomacy or their peaceful nature. It had always been their ability to survive impossible odds and emerge from darkness as something entirely new. The final battle for humanity's survival was about to begin in the place where it all started. Earth hung in space like a wounded jewel, its surface scarred by 50 years of alien occupation. The Galactic Council had turned humanity's homeworld into the ultimate symbol of their power, surrounding it with massive defense stations and weapon platforms that could destroy entire fleets. Admiral Choi Hoon-woo stood on the bridge of his flagship Rising Sun, looking out at the most incredible sight he had witnessed in his 70 years of life.
Wow.
47 different human fleets were emerging from dimensional phase at the edge of the Sol system, each one representing a colony that had survived and grown in the darkness between stars. These were not the scattered, refugee ships that had fled Earth 5 decades ago. These were the fleets of a species that had been forged into something new and terrible by 50 years of abandonment and betrayal. Each colony had developed in different ways, creating technologies and capabilities that the galaxy had never seen before. All ships. This is Admiral Choi. He broadcast across the entire armada. Today we do not just take back our home world. Today, we show the galaxy that humanity cannot be destroyed, cannot be erased, and will never again be ignored. The response came back from hundreds of ship captains, their voices creating a chorus that spoke of absolute determination. These were the children and grandchildren of Earth, returning to reclaim their birthright. The Council forces defending Earth had been preparing for this moment. Ever since the first reports of humanity's return reached them, defense platforms the size of small moons ringed the system, their weapons designed to stop any fleet that dared approach. Thousands of alien warships patrolled the space around Earth, confident that their superior numbers and firepower would crush any human attack. But they were expecting to fight the same humans who had fled Earth 50 years ago. They had no idea what humanity had become in the darkness. Commander Park Jin-woo's stealth fleet struck first. His ships had spent decades perfecting the ability to move through space without being detected by any known sensor system. It materialized inside the Council's defensive perimeter like ghosts, becoming solid. Their weapons already firing before the enemy knew they were there. Dr. Kong. Soyoung's bio-enhanced Marines followed immediately after. These were humans who had been genetically modified to survive in the harshest environments imaginable. They phased through energy barriers that should have been impossible to cross, their enhanced bodies allowing them to survive in the vacuum of space without protection. Director Nam Woo-song's terraforming vessels began, releasing clouds of microscopic machines into the space around Earth. These nanites had been designed to transform dead worlds into garden planets, but they could also be programmed to turn enemy structures into allies. Within minutes, Council defense platforms were turning their weapons on each other as the nanites reprogrammed their targeting systems. But it was Admiral Choi himself who led the most important attack, the massive orbital fortress that hung above. Earth had been built from the wreckage of human cities, a deliberate insult that had haunted humanity's survivors for decades. The alien architects had used pieces of destroyed human monuments, schools and hospitals to construct their symbol of dominance. Rising Sun to all units, Admiral Choi announced as his flagship approached the fortress. That station was built from the bones of our civilization. Today we reclaim those bones and use them to build something better. The fortress was the most heavily defended structure in the system, surrounded by energy shields that could stop planet-killing weapons. But the Rising Sun was not using conventional weapons. The flagship's main cannon fired a beam of pure energy that seemed to learn and adapt as it struck the fortress's defenses. Each shot was stronger than the last. The weapon's artificial intelligence analyzing the shield frequencies and adjusting its output to find weaknesses. Within minutes, the supposedly impenetrable barriers were failing under the assault of technology that seemed to think for itself. The battle for Earth lasted 18 hours. When it finally ended, the orbital fortress was a drifting wreck, and human ships were descending toward their home world for the first time in 50 years. Admiral Choi stood in the ruins of what had once been Seoul, breathing air that still carried traces of radiation from the ancient disaster. Earth was wounded, scarred by decades of alien occupation and strip mining, but it was alive. In hidden valleys and underground shelters, plants and animals had survived, waiting for their guardians to return. He activated a communication system that would broadcast his message across the entire galaxy. To the Galactic Council and all member species, he began, his voice carrying the weight of 50 years of exile and pain. Humanity has returned to reclaim what was always ours. We did not come back to beg for readmission to your council or to seek your forgiveness. We came back to ensure that what you did to us never happens to anyone else." Behind him, human construction ships were already beginning the work of rebuilding Earth's cities. But these would not be copies of what had existed before. They would be something new, built with technologies and perspectives that had been developed in the crucible of survival. "You wrote us off as extinct," Admiral Choi continued. "You divided our territory among yourselves and built monuments to your victory on our sacred ground. You forgot the most important lesson about humanity. We are very good at surviving, and we never forget those who betray us." As his broadcast ended, lights began to appear across Earth's night side for the first time in 50 years. From orbit, the planet looked like a phoenix rising from its own ashes. It's beautiful and terrible and absolutely unstoppable. The galaxy had learned that humanity could not be destroyed. Now they would learn to respect the species that had returned from extinction with fire in their hearts.